Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon. Uh, Welcome to our Friends of Imperial College Fireside Chat. And today it's rather special. We have Professor Ian Walmsley, CBE FRS, actually technically I think also a member of the physics department, but more importantly, the Provost of Imperial College. And I think maybe he will explain it better, but Provost is really in charge of the entire academic aspect of the institution. Because I was here as a student and indeed on the faculty. And what I liked about Imperial was it always had a slightly different flavor to anywhere else. And I think that hasn't changed. And I imagine that as Ian tells us about Imperial in the 21st century, we're going to hear his perspectives on what makes Imperial what Imperial is. I think I should just say shortly, Ian's sort of specialities are things like quantum computing, photonics. He started as a student at Imperial, then I think went to the University of Rochester in the United States, and then came back to University of Oxford, and finally saw the light and joined Imperial, and made the provost 5-6 years ago, I think. Is that correct, Ian? That's right. Okay, Ian, the floor is yours.
David, thank you very much for that introduction and for the kind invitation to speak to the Friends of Imperial. It's great to see so many of you on the call this afternoon. I've got a few things to say about Imperial as it is today, and very happy to talk with you afterwards about any aspect of that, or any aspect of Imperial itself. As David noted, I am a graduate of Imperial, and it's certainly true that from the mid or late 20th century to the early 21st century, things have changed. But also, David, some things haven't changed. I'm sure that some of the decor in Blackett is still the same as it was 40 years ago, but one can never tell. Anyway, let's move on. May I please, William, have the first slide? Thank you very much. So a few thoughts about where we are at Imperial in this current, I guess, first quarter 21st century now, and what's been happening in the last year or so to sort of set a course for the next 5 years. So next slide, please. Imperial, as you know, is an entity, a university that is STEM B. It is an institution that has at its core research and education for the benefit of society. That's very clearly in our charter. And that is really what we are building on now. We intend to continue at the forefront of science, engineering, medicine, and business, to be known worldwide for ideas and for the impact that they can deliver, both exceptional discovery, transformative application, delivered through exceptional education, world-leading research, and innovation. And that really demands both a capacity and a capability in areas of research that are critical to extending all of our disciplinary frontiers, as well as enabling interdisciplinary research and collaboration and supporting societal impact through innovation and wider engagement. So the strategy developed over the past year and a half and launched earlier this year really builds on that core mission drawing on current ideas from across the institution, from our staff, from our students, from our alumni, from various partners, industry, donors, government stakeholders, etc., where there has been quite a lot of consultation and iteration to get to the current point. The core academic strategy remains focused both on strong disciplines as well as distinctive capabilities for Imperial. So that will be quantitative, engaged, interdisciplinary, and focuses or draws on those strengths to think about ways in which a sustainable, healthy, resilient, and smart society can benefit from our expertise, knowledge, and convening power. The strategy itself then draws together a number of initiatives that build on these strengths and distinctive capabilities. So let me go to the next slide, please. This is sort of the high level. I'm not going to go through it all in detail, but I'll pick out a few of these things which directly impact the academic mission. So you can see on the left there sort of three general themes around broadly education, research, and societal impact, societal benefit. Clearly, we can, will, and continue to enable people to reach their full capability, educating them not only in detailed knowledge of their own subjects, but their ability to work across boundaries and their ability to be leaders. So we expect Imperial students to be out in the world really making a difference from the front as they have in the past. In research, one of the key initiatives is thinking about how we do interdisciplinarity at a new scale. We have been good at that in the past through networks, through centers, and through global institutes, our global institutes. But we think there's a possibility, an opportunity to bring together that in a more coherent and focused way around a small number of topics that allow us to project Imperial strengths into the outside world better and to provide a window and portal into Imperial for the outside world that just makes it easier to engage. And through those, we expect to influence and engage the stakeholders outside. And part of that will be to amplify impact, to make sure that ideas which are appropriate can be de-risked and put out into the world in a way that can yield benefit as quickly as possible, as well as to use our position as a trusted authority in science, engineering, medicine, and business as to convene and engage partners, whether that's working with us or working with each other, but to be known as that location where these ideas can be debated in a serious way. On the right-hand side, you see 9 boxes. They all contain the 9 initiatives that are embedded in the strategy. Again, I'm not going to go through in detail, but I'll pick up on these 3 that are starred: Imperial Empowers, which is really about what does future education look like. Second, around Imperial Futures, which are about the ways in which we will deliver interdisciplinary science. And third, the Imperial West Tech Corridor, which builds on the increasing mass of the college out in the White City, Hammersmith, Acton area to think about how we anchor an economic district out there that can really make a difference in terms of prosperity for not only for West London but also for the UK. All right, next slide, please. So let me start with the Imperial Futures theme. At the heart of that are these new schools of convergent science. There'll be 4 of those, and in the areas noted there: human and artificial intelligence, climate, energy and sustainability, health, medtech and robotics, and space security and telecommunications. They will be launched over the next 2 years. You can expect announcements on those probably early next year. And the intention is to provide structures and a culture that can really bring together experts in different areas to have a very deeply integrated research community. The idea is that in order to drive significant change and make progress in these quite difficult areas, that having people work together over a long period of time in a concentrated way will enable both the common languages and the contextual frameworks to be built that can then inform and set agendas and attract support and resource that's needed to work on those. And by having that in a way that sort of allows people deeper or less deep engagement as they see fit, we think we'll have quite a powerful means to engage across the college over time a great set of experts and key persons. The additional benefits are through that strength and through that framing of those problems, we will have a better shop window for external partners. So we will be able to bring together a wider range of partners. We'll be able to help think about new ways of approaching these problems. We'll be able to develop larger scale research programs and have an experience for our postgraduate research students that not only has them rooted in their own disciplines in departments, but has an opportunity for really building networks and expertise across different disciplines. We hope that will also, again, attract larger scale resources to enable these programs, as well as to influence the agendas at the national and European and hopefully international levels as well. Next slide, please, William. Thank you. So a key element of the educational theme is to think about what learning will need to be in the future. And we see that at the core of this will remain our residential 4-year undergraduate degree programs and 1-year master's programs. We believe there's no full substitute for engaging with experts and world-leading researchers as part of that education and as part of developing understanding through your learning. Nevertheless, there is certainly a big opportunity for continued learning. The world is changing rapidly and will continue to do so. And those of us who graduated more than 10 years ago are having to now relearn or learn anew how to utilize and apply artificial intelligence, for example. And that's going to be true across careers into the future. So this new Imperial Institute of Extended Learning seeks to utilize our reach through digital learning technologies, coupled with some residential elements, to help meet this growing demand for short courses, for continuing professional development, and for advanced STEM education. Helpfully, not only informing current leaders about trends and opportunities and issues they need to be aware of. Our technical colleagues in industry, where current cutting edge thinking is, and indeed all sorts of people thinking about how they would like to change their own career paths and what skills they might need or knowledge they might need in order to do that. So we think that this will be of value for both individuals and business. We think that it has an increased geographic reach for obvious reasons, that digital is more easily diversified in that respect than bringing people to our London campuses. And also that it will reach new kinds of demographics as well. There are lots of people who may benefit from an Imperial education who we're not currently able to bring to our residential courses for any number of reasons, but not least of which is we don't really have enough scholarships to cover that need completely. That's another issue that we're working on, but I'm not going to talk much about that here. Next slide, please, William. Great, thank you. So the Imperial West Tech Corridor is really building on the strengths that have been accumulated and the investments that have been made over the past few decades. The Albertopolis campus in South Kensington, I'm sure you're all aware of. That's our historical home from the early 20th century. The conjunction of medical schools and medical campuses in the late 20th century, 1997, I think, brought in St. Mary's, brought in a number of hospitals northward, and Hammersmith in particular. And our medical school, which is also world leading in its own right, has built upon those connections. What that has begun to spawn is a life sciences cluster around the Paddington area and reaching across to our own White City campus. So the purchase of that campus about 15 years ago or so was a step change in Imperial's geography, but it has allowed us now to build a campus where we have state-of-the-art facilities, a clear focus on deep tech and life science innovation, and the ability to grow the college in new directions. So we are planning out there a new building which will allow us to increase our activity in computing, in AI and machine learning, in business around its economic, financial, quantitative finance undergraduate courses and other graduate courses, and in mathematics, where statistics, etc., underpin machine learning, but the pure mathematics and the applied mathematics also reach to other departments across the college. So that's our first investment on the South Campus, but of course, we already have quite a large activity out there. So an immediate phase of that is going to bring together the amenities needed as student and staff numbers grow there. Old Oaken Park Royal is an area where we have over the past decade built halls of residence for students. So as we increase the number of students, we will be increasing the number of residences out there. But we've also recently purchased the Victoria Industrial Estate, which will provide new innovation and incubation spaces for spin-out companies and other companies that want to locate there. So you begin to see that broadly along the A and M40, we are building an innovation cluster that we think will have a powerful impact on the economy and districts in West London, and will also enable us to reach further afield. In some sense, Oxford will be a suburb of London, and in this context, that innovation ecosystem stretching from us through Reading to Harwell and Oxford will, I think, be quite powerful. I shouldn't forget Silwood Park either. You see that noted there. That's been in part of the college for a very long time and is certainly thriving as a site for ecology and sustainability research. A number of departments, it's traditionally been a life sciences field station, but it is now growing with a number of other departments having footprints out there for research relevant to everything from net zero to crop genetics. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I've noted the development at White City, and that now has a large community based around primarily the Molecular Sciences Research Hub, largely chemistry and materials related activity. The UREN building, which has in it a large number of collaborations between medicine, Faculty of Medicine and Faculty of Engineering, including Frank Kelly's pollution group, the Royce nanofabrication facilities, a joint bioengineering, surgery and cancer, robotics and med tech accelerator. And we opened this year the new School of Public Health, which has our community having moved from the St. Mary's Medical School site. On the South Campus there, we have Scale Space, which is a growth space for companies, a joint venture with Blenheim Chalcott. And I've noted the new academic building that will go up there, about 40,000 square meters or so. It's intended to complete that by 2029, 2030. And together with that will be a building in which we locate partners, so industry or NGOs or others who are able to rent space there and work with us, drawing on academic strengths from across Imperial. It has already made a transformation in White City, which you will certainly see if you go out there, including around the periphery and property over which we have no direct interest. But we will be moving some professional staff out there as the campus grows so that we have the right support mechanisms in place to enable that campus to thrive. There is a very strong set of programs that work with the local community so that we're able to share and encourage and inspire everyone from primary school kids to people who have retired and welcome them to the campus and show them around a bit. Next slide, please. And there you have a picture of it, just with things labeled. I'm not sure what you could see there, but the big tower is a residential tower. Adjacent to that on the left is the UREN building with biomed engineering, materials and biotech. The public health, School of Public Health is actually just to the right of that tower. It looks like a hole in the ground on this picture, but actually it's now a very nice building just opened. And off to the right there is Hammersmith Hospital with our medical campus. So we have National Heart and Lung Institute, as well as immunology and London Institute of Medical Sciences, which all sit on that campus adjacent to the hospital. Onto the left of the UREN building. Oh, sorry, not quite finished yet. That's okay. Thanks, William. You can see the iHub, which is our incubation space. And then just to the south of that, as you raise up the picture, the scale space, innovation space. And right under the words where it says advanced materials is where the new academic building is going to start rising out of the ground. Great. Thank you, William. I think that is the last slide. So I will finish there and then be happy to take questions or comments, or generally hear your thoughts.
Right, thank you very much. Get myself back on screen. That was very informative, and I'll imagine there'll be a few questions. So what I propose for questioners is that you use the chat facility as we usually do, and put questions into the chat, and we'll try and pick them all up. If you want to ask the question directly, put it still in the chat, and I'll give you the option of going live and being unmuted. Okay, so the question that immediately occurred to me, Ian, was I can see the connections in some of these new initiatives, really very important at the graduate level, masters, postgraduate students, PhDs, where you've got new environments occurring and frankly losing some of the ivory tower aspects of universities. What about the undergraduates? To what degree will an Imperial undergraduate, if you like, be aware of this grand, excellent strategy?
Thanks, David. Yes, a very good question. I think that will happen in a number of ways. If we think about interdisciplinarity, there will be perhaps a couple of main themes. One is that the new schools of convergent science will each be producing modules in their areas, which can be part of an undergraduate degree course as an optionality. So we would expect, for example, every student to know something about sustainability, about climate, energy, environment. We would expect every student to know something about AI, and these will provide the fora for that to happen. Second, excuse me, I think that they will also provide project opportunities for fourth-year students or summer research projects, and we hope to be able to engage as many undergraduate students as we can in those activities. And then on the entrepreneurship, that's sort of key feature or a distinctive capability of Imperial, and we will be wanting to build and support and continue to grow things like the Enterprise Lab that allow our undergraduate students in particular, but postgrad taught as well, to be thinking about how their ideas can be turned into businesses, whether those are social enterprises or commercial activities. So we will want to utilize all of these distinctive features of Imperial to impact the undergraduate programs. At the moment, the programs themselves will be still, of course, overseen and run and designed by departments. But we hope that as you well know, the way in which research filters into those as a way to really help drive, motivate, and illuminate the principles of the discipline, I think will be also informed by these interdisciplinary activities.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I mean, is it, does this distinguish Imperial from other institutions? I mean, it seems to me it does, but are you deliberately trying to think of the university we should have in the future? Is that?
Yes, absolutely, David. In fact, that was the starting point for developing this strategy, was to say, what should Imperial look like in 20 years' time? How should we be thinking about positioning what we do to be not just relevant, but central to what the world is like at that time? And some of those questions are, as you have asked, what should an education look like? What should a student who graduates in 2030 be be able to do and able to do. And then these areas, these schools of convergent science were very much framed around what are the themes that we think are going to be critical that we have a presence in and are able to provide solutions toward in that time frame. So absolutely, what does the world look like in the future? How can we contribute to making sure it's a better place?
Okay, I see some questions appearing in the chat, so why don't we take those, some of those. Derek Yates, would you like to be unmuted and present your question?
Yes, sorry, just figured out how to do this. Right. No, just wondering if you could comment on the funding pressures that the whole sector is facing and what you would advise the government to do to maintain the UK's strong position.
Thank you, Derek. I note there's another question in, so if you'll forgive me for just suggesting perhaps Vincent, you can read your question, then I'll take the two together because I think they're different aspects of a very similar sort of challenge, if that's okay.
So Vince?
Yep. I hope I'm on you. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Good. Yes, I mean, most universities in the country are suffering at the moment from declining fees from UK graduates because of the frozen limit. How is Imperial affected by that? And do you see a decline in the proportion of undergrads coming from the UK in the future?
Well, thank you, Derek and Vincent, for both those questions. Of course, quite critical to the way in which Imperial does business. So let me start at the national and sectoral level, and then move down to the specific level. And then, if I fail to address a point, please do come back. You're absolutely right that the fees introduced in 2010 and uplifted, I think, last in 2017, have been stuck at 9,250 for UK students. And as inflation has worked its way through that, of course, the actual inflationary value of that would need to be somewhere north of 12,500 now, just to keep even. Although the government hints that there will be an indexing of fees from next year, I think that it's just not going to catch up. So every institution has been working on a different model, and Imperial is right centrally in that sector, which is that essentially for every home undergraduate student you take, you better have an overseas student who's able to pay a significantly higher fee. And those numbers for Imperial are roughly the following: that excluding medicine, which is particularly expensive, but it's around 16,500 per annum per undergraduate cost of provision. We get 9,250 per home undergraduate. And not only is that pay for education, but it has to pay for things like bursaries and other tuition waivers and things that we give for scholarships. And then an overseas student may pay sort of 25,000 to 30,000 pounds. So that's how that's the model on which we work. And what that means for us is that we are around 51% overseas students at the undergraduate level, so around 50% UK, and it's that economics that sort of drives that. In part, I should say that there are huge benefits to having bringing a global perspective to undergraduate education by having people from different parts of the world. and huge benefits to Imperial in having alumni networks around the world, often of people who are in quite important and influential positions. And that brings partnerships and other links that are critical. The other pressure on the sector is that the cost of research is nominally 80% of full economic costs, and that's a deliberate Treasury policy. Now, we do have a QR funding directly from Research England through UKRI, which offsets some of that, but our general sense is that we recover about 73–75% of the cost of doing research. So we also have to put some of the earnings from overseas student fees into supporting that. That model is very standard. I think Oxford and Cambridge are probably the only ones who are not reliant on it to the same degree, but everyone is reliant on it. And the challenge in the sector has been that as the value of the home fee has eroded, then the necessity to have more overseas students to enable costs to be met has been an increasing pressure. And then we become vulnerable to other things, geopolitical and economic downturns elsewhere in the world, our own governments and other governments' view about immigration. And I think that last year certainly converged on a number of Russell Group universities and others to find themselves in a significant cash shortfall situation. That hasn't happened at Imperial. And in fact, our application numbers from overseas have gone up, and we have been able to maintain our fee structure in such a way that we have been able to run with a small cash positive operational sheet. I think that is driven to a very large extent by Imperial's stellar international reputation. And however one wants to think about rankings, then never anything that feel very pleasant to be quoting, but I do think they play a role in attracting students from overseas. And I think that's a challenge for the UK as a whole, is that if you are a university that isn't in, say, Times Higher top 50, I think it's just that much harder to attract the students that you need. So it's a bit of a challenging time.
Okay, sorry.
Well, there was a question for, I think, part of Derek's question was, what should the government do? Well,
yes. I think we got the drift as to what you might say, but you might as well say it, Ian.
Well, I think, you know, there are various views about that, and I'd say, the common view is that the government should provide more support. But I think there are other options that we could consider too. You know, governments put VAT on private school fees. Okay, that may be reasonable. What that says is that there's a sector, and there's quite a number of students from that sector come to Imperial, as to other universities, which is able to pay. So one could ask, well, why don't we separate loans and fees and have a tuition discount-based model that allows us to recover more from UK students who are able to pay? Clearly, we need to ensure those who aren't able to pay can still access, but I think there are ways to do that. Cost of research, well, we could seek to pressure for full economic cost of research. I think that would necessarily lower the total volume of research done in the UK, and therefore I think we need a careful conversation about the impact on that on our ability to really help drive prosperity in society in the UK. I think Imperial will be fine, but if you're in Newcastle and you don't have good research, you don't have the ideas and the innovation ecosystem that you will need to help that region thrive as well. So it's a challenge.
Okay, there's a slight change of tone in the question from Diana. Diana, wherever you are, I can't see you. Shall I read the question? So Diana is saying, as someone who'd like to invest in startups, how may I do this? And as I've left money in my will and was kindly made a member of the Queen's Tower Society, why don't I hear anything from Imperial? I should love to support Imperial. So I think the point is you put out a very interesting picture of a startup friendly world somewhere around White City. How much should you be doing to promote investment and encourage the business?
Well, first, thank you, Diana. It's great to hear of your enthusiasm and willingness to support. There are two things I would point to. One is we are just starting a new venture fund to help drive that ecosystem. Now, it will be a standard venture fund structure, so generally large-scale, large-ticket investors, but our intention is to get to an investment fund of scale that can really help us to be spinning out 15, 20 companies a year in a de-risked way that allows them to grow and reach a scale. Second is that there are ways in which we support the de-risking of that through proof of concept. And that's an area of funding. Well, in the budget yesterday or 2 days ago, Rachel Reeves put £40 million into a pot for doing that proof of concept funding. And that's an area where in the past, we have often had individual investors provide some support. So there are many ways, I think, in which your interests can perhaps be met. Now, why don't you hear anything from Imperial? A very good question. I'm not sure I have a very good answer, except we clearly haven't worked hard enough. I will say that there is a new vice president of advancement who's starting in January. She's coming from Johns Hopkins in the US, and I expect that we're anticipating that one of the steps that we will do there is to work much more closely and effectively with alumni, seeking out the right opportunities to engage with all of you.
Okay, thank you. So Henry Weatherburn, you want to speak up and...
Hello.
Yes, you're unmuted, so Henry, please go ahead. And I think it's a very interesting question you've got.
Yeah. What models are you using for this interdisciplinary work? If I could give you an example from my background, I was originally a physics graduate who then undertook an MSc at Bucks and then a PhD in medical radiation physics at the Hammersmith. And I moved on to work in medical physics, including being the director of medical physics here in Oxford. And I wonder if you're using the medical physics approach as a model for these integrated services, whereby you've got people from physics backgrounds, but working with medical services in the NHS and in the universities. Are you using that as an example, or are there other examples which you're using?
You're exactly right that how one gets the individuals who have training in one area to work with and move into other areas is the key challenge. I don't think we have adopted one that's specifically like medical physics, but we certainly have got areas where we bring together the students and staff in those different areas. So I mentioned the UREN building, where we have bioengineering and cancer and surgery. Both have teams that sit adjacent to one another with students that are working between them, so that we begin to have that cross-departmental, cross-disciplinary activity built in the way that may have a bit of analogy to what you noted here. Opportunities such as moving from an undergraduate degree in one department to a master's in another certainly remain, and I hope that these schools will help to stimulate that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Tim, I can see you, so would you like, and you look like you're unmuted, would you like to move on to your question?
Thank you, David, and thank you, for Professor Walmsley. My question follows Henry's, and I think you've already touched on some of these points. So Imperial has historically had good connections between the undergraduates, postgraduates, researchers, and being on one site when I was a student there was cross-fertilization between what the old schools were of the formal definitions in the academic world. Now you've described how you're breaking down those differentiations and finding benefits by doing so, but there must be difficulties when these potential link-ups are going to be even more so physically separated because of the different physical locations of the campuses.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It is indeed a very important question, and one that sort of vexes us as we try and design how things are going to operate. You're right. Ideally, it would have been great to have things on one campus, but clearly there's not the physical space to do that as we grow these important areas. So the conjunction and working together of different campuses becomes important. Let's see, two things. First of all, disciplinary homes are quite important for having a cohesive community. It doesn't work if everybody's just a member of Imperial. So we'll retain those. But on there's some good examples of working across multiple sites. Now, the medics have done this for a long time, so we've learned a bit from them about how to do it. But if you take bioengineering now, it has about half its cohort, half its staff on South Ken and half in, or maybe less than a half in White City. So the way that they have sought to glue that together is through several things. Firstly, timetabling. Don't try and have people go back and forth many times a day. Limit that to, you go to one campus one day, maybe you have one journey to another campus. Second, make sure that you have meetings, all staff meetings at both campuses, so that you don't always prefer one campus over the other. Third, make sure we have sort of landing spaces at each place. So if you're based primarily in White City and you come to South Ken, you know there'll be a desk space, you can hook your computer up, something like that. And then the fourth, use things like this. So when you have meetings and conversations, they can be efficiently and transactionally done through remote working, then utilize that. So that's the approach we're taking. I think it'll take a while to figure out how we get it right, but I think there are some examples on which we can build.
Okay. I think that's run the list at the moment in the chat, but please don't be shy. I'll come back with a question of my own, because one thing that strikes me about the virtue of being a college or a university based in London is that much of the government is there. And yet I would sort of guess that probably we don't do quite as much policy work or informing government of things as perhaps Oxford and Cambridge do. But is that a prejudice on my part? I mean, it's a frustration on my part, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's probably not quite a fair criticism, David, because you're right, we are very close. And what that means is we get a large number of visits. Having been at Oxford too, my my experience here, of course, I have a different role here, is that the number and frequency of visits from government departments and ministers is higher here than in Oxford. For example, Theresa May, remember her, launched the net zero strategy right here, the national net zero strategy right here at the carbon capture plant in chemical engineering. So I think we have that prominence. There are quite regular things like the Imperial Forum where these things are, these conversations and engagements work well. I certainly have worked with our public policy teams and government agency teams on various questions of policy, and I know that many colleagues do that too. We've had quite a number of CSA, chief science advisors, departmental chief science advisors. I think we only have one at the moment, but that's been an important way in which Imperial's had a role in government. And indeed, your colleague, Michelle Doherty, has just become the chief exec of the Science and Technology Facilities Council, so right in the heart of UKRI. I think so. I think we have a prominence in government. Well, I mean, another example, the investment summit that the government ran just 2 weeks ago. Only one university got mentioned in the press releases from that, and that was Imperial. Oxford or Cambridge were not mentioned. So I think that's sort of an indication of the Imperial's presence in the mind of government, if you like.
Well, thank you, Ian. I feel firmly put in my place on that one. Very quickly, because we do have to wrap up soon. I'm aware you have business beyond 5 o'clock. Question from Vince again, Vince Harris. Would you like to say anything about the announcement, I think, a couple of days ago, about a hub in California? That's a bit further away than White City.
Yes. Well, we've set up 4 hubs now: Singapore, USA, California, Africa in Ghana, in Accra, and in India we're setting up one later this year. So the broad rationale for those is that in those countries we have a number of key stakeholders. They may be alumni, they may be academic partners, they may be industry partners, they may be governments who we're working with, they may be philanthropic funders, and indeed they may be students that we wish to recruit from those nations. So what we wanted to do was to have a footprint in those areas that allowed us to build and sustain and grow those networks. And the experiment is put people on the ground there. I mean, it's 1 or 2 in each country. It's not a large number, and use those to build and sustain those networks so that when you, colleagues, I go out there, we have a ready-made set of places we can plug in and really try and build college business in those parts of the world, and presence and name recognition and all of the things that are going to be important to sustain us for the future. So we'll see how it works out, but I think it's going to be, it's a good thing for us to do, and I think quite exciting and consistent with Imperial as a global institution and a global force for good.
And indeed, as Imperial doing things differently to other people, to other universities in the UK. I think that's clearly one of the things you've been telling us so well. I think we're going to have to wrap up the questions at this point. Let me thank you, Ian, for the time you've spent with us and for giving us this gestalt of Imperial in the wider world, and yet still the university for the 21st century. I think it's appropriate that if you can unmute, you can let your appreciation be sounded in the normal way Otherwise, I think there's an applause system in Zoom. But anyhow, thank you very much. You're welcome to come back again, but
Well,
really, thank you very much for sharing your perspective on Imperial in this century. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great to have a chance to chat with you all, and look forward to revisiting friends in the future.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, we'll see you again.
Bye-bye.